The Bitterroot Mountains loomed like sleeping giants, their peaks buried under snow that glowed pale beneath the winter moon. A lone rider made her way along the narrow trail, her horse's hooves crunching softly in the frozen crust. June Calhoun had been on the road for 3 days, following smoke she'd seen twisting above the valley. Her duster coat was stiff with frost, her hat low over her eyes, and her gloved hands trembled from cold. She wasn't running from the past anymore. She was just riding toward whatever would take her in. When she spotted the cabin half buried in drifts, a crooked chimney puffing gray smoke, she pulled her horse to a stop. The place looked half alive, half forgotten. Fences had fallen, and a swing hung from a bare oak branch, creaking in the wind. She saw no sign of life, except the faint sound of laughter carried through the snow. Not the kind of laughter that came from joy, but from wildness. She pressed her lips together and dismounted slowly, her boots sinking into the cold white earth. Inside the cabin, Elias Boone stirred the fire with a poker. The man was all edges and silence, his beard streaked with gray, his eyes heavy from too many sleepless nights. Around him, 5 boys tumbled like wolves, shouting, fighting, breaking whatever wasn't nailed down. Every woman he'd hired to help had fled before sundown. "Pa, she ran!" shouted Caleb, the oldest, 12 and already hard around the eyes. "Didn't last a day." Elias said nothing, just stared into the fire and wondered if the mountain itself had cursed them. The knock came so faintly at first that he thought it was the wind. Then it came again, slow, deliberate, a stranger's rhythm. He rose, his shadow stretching across the cabin wall, and pulled open the door. Snow swirled in. A woman stood there, small against the storm, wrapped in a tattered coat and the quiet strength of someone too stubborn to die. "Evenin'," she said, voice hoarse. "I heard you might be needing a hand." Elias's grip tightened on the doorframe. "You're lost," he muttered. "Ain't nobody needs to be up this mountain." June shook her head. "I'm not lost," she said, "just tired of leavin' places." Her tone wasn't pleading, it was matter of fact, the way folks spoke when they'd run out of pride. Behind Elias, the boys had gone still, peering from corners like half-wild animals. "We don't need no woman," shouted Jake, the second oldest, his grin sharp with mischief. June's gaze met his, steady as a loaded gun. "Good thing I ain't one of those delicate women," she said. "Now, are you going to let me in before I freeze?" Elias hesitated, jaw working. He'd seen plenty of tough talkers blown away by mountain storms, but there was something different in her stance. She didn't beg, didn't threaten. She just waited, eyes calm, snow melting on her hat brim. Finally, he stepped aside. "Then you ride on." June nodded, stepped inside, and shut the wind behind her. The warmth hit her like a memory she didn't trust. The cabin smelled of smoke, stew, and something lonelier grief left too long in the air. The boys circled her from a distance, their curiosity sharp and wordless. The youngest, Tommy, couldn't have been more than 5. His hands were sticky with sap, and his hair stuck out like a bird's nest. June crouched to his height. "You, the quiet one?" she asked gently. He nodded once. "Good," she said. "Quiet ones notice what matters." Tommy blinked, unsure what to make of her. But for the first time that day, he smiled just a little. Elias saw it and looked away, as if the sight hurt his chest. June moved toward the fire, removed her gloves, and rubbed her hands. Her fingers were calloused, nicked from work, not polished like the women Elias remembered from before his wife passed. She spotted the kettle sitting cold on the stove. Without asking, she filled it with snow, set it on the flame, and began tidying the clutter around her. "You don't gotta, I do," she cut in softly. "Can't sit still when there's things need doing." The boys stared like she was performing magic. When the kettle began to hiss, the cabin grew oddly quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. June poured warm water into tin mugs, handing one to each boy. Drink, she said. Ain't fancy, but it'll thaw your insides. The boys obeyed without argument, each sipping like it was the first kind thing they'd been offered in months. Elias sat watching, arms folded, the lines around his eyes deepening. He'd seen women clean, scold, and preach. When supper came, she ate little, speaking less. Her eyes wandered to a shelf above the hearth where a woman's bonnet hung, dust-coated but carefully placed. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. Some things on a man's wall spoke loud enough. Later, when the boys had dozed off in a pile of blankets, she sat by the fire mending a torn sleeve with neat, practiced stitches. Elias finally broke the silence. You from down in the valley? She nodded. Was, till the valley ran out of reasons to stay. The firelight caught her face's soft features hardened by travel, a mouth that seemed more used to silence than laughter. Elias studied her quietly. You got family? He asked. Had, she answered. The kind the world takes quicker than you can bury 'em. He didn't press further. Mountain folks didn't pry when grief was sitting between them. Instead, he poured her another cup of coffee, thick and bitter, the only peace offering he knew. She accepted with a nod that said thank you without words. Outside, the snow piled higher, muting the world to silence. June watched the flames dance and felt something unfamiliar, safe, but temporary, like standing under a stranger's roof during a storm. The boys snored softly, curled around each other like pups. Elias's heavy boots creaked as he stood. Couch is yours, he said. Blanket too. I'll saddle your horse come dawn. June smiled faintly. We'll see, she murmured. He didn't ask what she meant. He just nodded once and went to his room. Morning broke gray and slow. Frost lined the windows, and the fire had burned low. June was already up, sleeves rolled, working the skillet with the focus of someone who'd cooked through worse hunger. The smell of cornbread and bacon filled the cabin, stirring the boys from their beds. Tommy rubbed his eyes. Smells like heaven, he whispered. Caleb nudged him. Ain't no heaven up here, fool. June looked over her shoulder. Then I reckon we'll make one. Elias stepped out, blinking at the scene. His boys, usually a whirlwind of noise, were sitting quiet, waiting for her signal to eat. She'd tamed them not with threats or bribes, but with calm. You plan on staying? He asked. June flipped a biscuit with steady hands. I plan on earning breakfast. It was the kind of answer that left no room for argument. Elias found himself smiling for the first time in months, though he tried to hide it behind his beard. After breakfast, she took a broom, made from dried twigs, and swept the floor. The boys followed her lead, carrying wood, feeding the horses, patching holes in the barn walls. Elias watched from the porch, bewildered. It wasn't that she'd made them obedient, it was that she'd made them want to belong. When the chores were done, she leaned against the fence, breathing in the sharp mountain air. You've got good boys, she said. Just never been taught how to be gentle. Elias didn't know what to say to that. That afternoon, the sky turned iron gray. Snow fell heavy again, the kind that buried trails and tested souls. June stayed calm, organizing the boys like a field captain. You, she said to Caleb, stack wood by the door. Jake, check the chimney. The rest of you help me tie down the shutters. Her voice was firm but kind, like a melody against the wind. Elias joined her in the storm, his breath steaming. You give orders well, he said. I've had practice being ignored, she replied with a wry smile. By nightfall, the storm howled like an old spirit outside. Inside, the fire roared, and laughter, real laughter, filled the cabin for the first time since Elias's wife had passed. June sat by the hearth, strumming a worn guitar she carried in her saddlebag. The boys gathered close, their faces soft in the glow. Play another, Tommy begged. June nodded and sang low, her voice like honey and gravel. The song wasn't cheerful, but it was alive, and the mountain listened. When the music faded, silence returned, gentle this time. Elias looked at her across the fire. Ain't seen my boys that quiet since their ma. June met his gaze, unflinching. Boys need a reason to listen. Sometimes it ain't words, it's warmth. He nodded slowly. The truth in her tone was sharp as a knife, yet soft as a prayer. The wind howled, but inside the cabin, something new took root, something that felt like hope wearing boots. Later, as the fire dimmed, June wrapped her blanket around her shoulders and sat alone. Her eyes wandered to the window, where snow danced in the lamplight. She thought of the grave she left behind, the nights she'd spent talking only to her horse, and how strange it felt to belong somewhere again, even if only for a night. Don't get used to it, she whispered to herself. But her heart betrayed her, already thawing. Elias lingered in the doorway, watching her. He wanted to speak, thank her, warn her, something, but words felt too small for what he saw. A woman who'd ridden through a blizzard not to be saved, but to save something in herself. As the last ember cracked, he finally said, "Storm's worse than I thought. You'll need to stay till it clears." June looked up, eyes calm, knowing he'd already decided that before he said it. "Then I guess," she said softly, "we'll see if the mountain lets me." The storm raged for 2 days straight. Snow swallowed the valley, burying fences and trails until the world outside disappeared. Inside the cabin, June worked like she'd lived there all her life, tending the fire, mending socks, and teaching the boys how to carve whistles from pine. Elias watched her move between them, quiet but commanding. The mountain had never taken kindly to outsiders, yet she fit like she'd been carved from the same stubborn rock. "You ain't afraid of hard work," he said once. June smiled faintly. "Ain't afraid of much, truth be told. Just silence and losing it." When the sky finally cleared, the mountains glittered under sunlight, so bright it hurt the eyes. The boys tumbled out of the cabin, shouting, throwing snow, alive in a way Elias hadn't seen in years. June stood on the porch, arms crossed, smiling despite herself. She'd forgotten what children's laughter sounded like, how it could fill the air like bird song after a long winter. Caleb ran up with a crooked grin. "You staying for good, Miss June?" She ruffled his hair. "Depends if you stop throwing snakes at people." He laughed. "Then I guess you're staying." Days turned to a rhythm. June rose before dawn, lighting the stove and boiling coffee so strong it could wake the dead. Elias would come in from the barn, boots heavy with frost, and they'd share the kind of quiet that wasn't empty, just easy. Sometimes their eyes met across the table, two souls scarred by different storms, recognizing the same hunger for peace. She never spoke about her past, and he never asked. But when she looked out toward the horizon, he noticed her hand always rested near the old revolver on her hip. The boys followed her like ducklings. She taught them to braid rope, patch saddles, and mend torn shirts. Jake, the loudest, tried to test her patience more than once, sneaking a frog into her boot one morning. She didn't yell or scold, just slipped the frog gently into his hat. When he put it on, the scream that followed nearly shook the roof. The boys laughed until they cried. Even Elias chuckled. June only said, "Now we're even." After that, the boys worshipped her, though they'd never admit it. On the third Sunday, June saddled her mare and rode down to the frozen creek. Elias found her there an hour later, sitting on a rock, staring at the ice. "Thought you left," he said quietly. "I tried," she admitted, "but the horse turned me around." He studied her face, the way her eyes seemed to carry a map of all the places she'd been hurt. "You running from someone?" She didn't answer right away. "Ain't running," she said finally. "Just keeping ahead of the wrong kind of memory." That night, as the wind returned, she sat by the fire telling the boys stories, not fairy tales, but real ones. Tales of cattle drives, river crossings, and lightning storms that split trees like kindling. The boys listened wide-eyed. "You ever been scared?" Tommy asked. June looked into the flames. "Plenty of times, but fear's just proof you're still alive. Means you got something worth losing." Elias felt those words sink deep, like a nail driven into his chest. He hadn't realized until that moment how long it had been since he'd let himself feel afraid for anyone. Spring crept slowly down the mountain. The snow melted into silver streams, and patches of green pushed through the thaw. June took the boys riding through the lower pastures, teaching them how to read animal tracks and listen to the wind. "The land talks if you're quiet enough," she said. Caleb frowned. "What's it say?" She smiled softly. "Right now? Says y'all been too loud." The laughter that followed echoed down the hills, mixing with birdsong. Even Elias, watching from the ridge, felt something stir a warmth he'd buried beside his wife's grave years ago. The first sign of trouble came in late April. A rider passed through town asking questions, a man in a black duster with a scar running down his cheek. Folks said he had the look of a bounty hunter, the kind who never smiled unless someone was bleeding. When the news reached the mountains a week later, Elias saw the flicker in June's eyes, though she hid it fast. "You know him?" he asked. She didn't lie. "Used to." He didn't ask more. But that night, he sat long after everyone had gone to bed, cleaning his rifle in silence. The next morning dawned quiet, almost too quiet. The air felt heavy, thick with warning. June noticed it too. Her instincts had kept her alive long enough to trust them. She saddled her horse, checked the edge on her knife, and scanned the ridge above the cabin. Nothing moved except the wind. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something out there was watching. When she came back inside, Elias met her eyes. "If you're in danger, this ain't the place to bring it." "It already found me," she said softly. "I just stopped running." That evening, rain fell for the first time in months. The boys huddled around the fire, listening to thunder roll across the peaks. June sat sharpening her knife, movements slow and rhythmic. Tommy watched, wide-eyed. "You gonna fight someone, Miss June?" She smiled. "Only if they make me." "You're real brave," he said. She shook her head. "No, sweetheart. Brave is when you're scared but still do what's right." Outside, the storm cracked the sky open, but inside the cabin, the only thing burning brighter than the fire was the quiet courage growing between them. Elias found her outside after midnight, sitting on the porch steps, rain dripping from her hat. "You could have gone anywhere," he said. "Why here?" June's eyes traced the dark mountains. "Because I figured if I died up here, maybe the world wouldn't notice. But now, maybe someone would." Elias sat beside her. The silence between them, deeper than words. "Ain't nobody dying here," he said firmly. "Not while I got breath." She turned to him, eyes shimmering. "Then I reckon we're partners in stubborn." By May, the thaw had reached the high trails. The boys helped Elias mend fences and drive cattle while June repaired saddles in the barn. Sometimes Elias would find her humming softly old cowboy tunes his wife used to sing. It hurt and healed him all at once. One afternoon, she caught him staring. "Something on your mind, Boone?" He cleared his throat. "Just wondering how a woman like you ends up living by a gun." She smiled sadly. "Same way a man like you ends up raising boys alone. The world don't ask permission before it breaks you." When the bounty hunter finally appeared, he didn't come in guns blazing. He came quiet, just a shadow moving through the trees above the valley. June spotted him first. One look, and her blood ran cold. "Boys inside," she ordered. "Now." Elias stepped out onto the porch, shotgun resting across his arm. "Friend of yours?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Used to ride for the same outfit," June said, "till I saw what they were really selling." Her jaw tightened. "He's not here for talking." The man's voice came from the trees. "You've got something belongs to me, Calhoun." June didn't flinch. "Ain't nothing of yours left in me, Jeb." Elias cocked the shotgun, the click echoing like thunder. "You best ride down that trail while you still can," he warned. Jeb stepped out of the shadows, grinning. "You gonna hide behind a woman, Boone?" Elias's eyes narrowed. "No, but I'll bury one man for her, if I have to." The tension hung sharp and cold. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting to see who'd draw first. June's hand hovered near her revolver, but she didn't pull. "Jeb," she said calmly, "I ain't the same girl you used to break horses with. I don't scare easy." He laughed low. "I remember. That's what made you dangerous." The boys watched from the window, eyes wide. Caleb whispered, "She's gonna shoot him, Pa." Elias didn't answer. He saw the fire in June's stance steady, fearless. "You want to end this, Jeb?" she said. "Then do it." The bounty hunter's grin faltered. Something in her eyes told him she already had nothing left to lose. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Jeb spat into the dirt, muttered something under his breath, and turned his horse. "Ain't worth it," he said. "You're already dead. You just don't know it." He rode off into the pines, swallowed by shadow. June stood still, her breath shaking once before she regained control. Elias lowered the shotgun. "You all right?" he asked. "Yeah," she whispered. "Just tired of ghosts." He didn't press her, just reached out and rested a hand on her shoulder. It was the first time she didn't pull away. After that day, something changed between them. June still kept her guard up, but the edge softened. She laughed more, especially when Tommy tried to teach her how to whistle through a reed. At night, she'd sit on the porch while Elias carved wood by lantern light. The boys would chase fireflies until they fell asleep in the grass. "Ain't much of a life," she said once. Elias looked up. "It's more than I had before you rode in," she smiled. "Guess the mountain finally let me stay." Word spread through the valley about the strange new peace up at the Boone place. Folks said the wild boys had settled, the old man was smiling again, and a mysterious cowgirl kept them all in line. Some came to see for themselves, bringing pie, gossip, and wide eyes. June didn't mind the attention, but she kept her distance from town. "Too many folks down there like to ask questions," she told Elias, "and I've used up all my answers." He nodded. "Then they don't deserve your story." Summer rolled in, golden and slow. The grass turned sweet, the air warm enough to forget winter's cruelty. June rode out at sunrise each day, the boys trailing behind her like shadows. She taught them how to rope calves, spot storms, and respect the land. "You don't own this mountain," she said. "You belong to it." They listened, truly listened. At night, Elias would watch her from the porch, wondering if the mountain had sent her or if God had finally taken mercy on a house too long without laughter. But peace, like snow in spring, never lasts forever. One evening, June found a note nailed to the barn door. No name, no mark, just 4 words burned into the wood. "Debt still unpaid, Calhoun." She felt the world tilt beneath her boots. Elias found her standing there, eyes dark as the storm clouds gathering above the peaks. "Who's it from?" he asked. June looked toward the ridge, where the wind was rising again. "Someone who don't forgive easy," she said quietly. "And I reckon they just found me again." The note burned a hole in June's pocket all night, its 4 words whispering like a coyote at the edge of camp. She didn't sleep. She sat on the porch steps, hat low, eyes tracking constellations she used to navigate when there weren't any walls to keep wind out. Elias woke twice and pretended he didn't see her awake, giving her the gift of privacy he'd once needed himself. Before dawn, she folded the note and slid it under the coffee tin. When the boys rose, there was cornbread warming in the stove and a gentleness in her voice. She told them after breakfast, not dramatic, not heavy, only plain truth wrapped in steady breathing. "Before I came here, I rode for a cattle outfit that turned out not to be cattle at all, she said. Running guns across county lines for men who'd trade lives like poker chips. I took their money until I saw a boy no older than Jake, shot for looking brave. Her eyes flicked to the middle son, and he swallowed hard. I left that same night, took a ledger with names. That ledger is why they want me back. Elias said nothing for a while. Silence settled like fresh snow, soft but absolute. Finally, he leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice low. That ledger's still yours? June nodded. Hidden where men with spurs don't think to look. Caleb's jaw set like his father's. We can take 'em. June shook her head. You can grow. That's what you can do. Elias studied her a long moment. What do you want us to do? June blinked once, surprised by the question. I want to face it standing up, but I won't let it touch the boys. They made a plan without calling it one. Elias rode to town alone, eyes scanning the timberline. He visited the sheriff, a tired man who'd outlived 2 badges and 3 wars. The ledger's names turned his face the color of old tin. You hand me that book, I'll swear a posse and a judge before sundown, he said. Elias didn't promise. He bought salt, lamp oil, and a spool of heavy thread. When he left, a stranger leaned on the hitching rail, smiling with too many teeth. Elias met his eyes and didn't blink. The smile shrank. Back on the mountain, June drilled the boys like a summer chore that mattered more than fence mending. Doors barred at sundown, wood stacked by the hearth. Water buckets filled and set by each window fires a coward if you meet it early. Jake complained, of course, but his hands moved quick, steady. Tommy tied knots until his fingers memorized them. Caleb practiced breathing slowly, the way June showed him. So fear couldn't ride him like a stolen horse. We ain't soldiers, he said. No, June answered. You're boon men. That's worth 10 soldiers, if you listen. Near dusk, Jeb returned with 2 riders, a scarred man with a drooping eye, and a boy too young for the weight of a pistol. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, like wolves testing a fence. June stepped from the porch, Elias at her side, shotgun resting easy across his arm. Evening, she called. Storm'll catch you if you ride higher. Jeb smiled without warmth. We'll stay right here. Bring the ledger. June's voice didn't rise. Ain't here. The droop-eyed man fingered his holster. Elias shifted his weight. The clearing held its breath and refused to blink. Jeb's eyes slid past them to the window where a curtain twitched. You bring kids into this? His tone mocked, but something guilty flickered behind it. They were here before me, June said. And they'll be here after your dust. Jeb looked almost sad, then bored, then mean again. Lady, you stole from men who don't forgive. I'm just the messenger who prefers returning to town upright. Elias lifted the shotgun a hair. Then carry a better message. Jeb's smile cracked. Last time, ledger. June's hand hovered by her revolver, then dropped. No. It was the boy who twitched first, too young for patience, too scared for wisdom. His draw was clumsy, bullet jerking high into the porch post. Elias didn't fire. June moved faster than winter wind, her shot snapping the boy's pistol from his hand and biting clean through his hat brim. Silence detonated. Jeb swore, dragged the kid behind his horse, and sneered. You just made yourself expensive. He gestured to the droop-eyed man, who grinned. Fire, Jeb said. And then the forest answered, in a voice not human at all. Wolves howled from 3 directions at once. Wolves meant the ridge was theirs tonight. The men with town dust on their boots had misread the mountain's mood. The horses trembled, ears flat. Jeb cursed and pulled back. Tomorrow, he promised, retreating. Bring the book or bring a shovel. When they vanished into the pines, June's hands shook once, then stilled. Elias touched her elbow. You all right? She nodded. I aim to miss. Don't want that boy's ghost. Elias looked at the notch in the porch post and felt his own ghost settle. Tomorrow, he repeated, as if naming the day could tame it. They didn't sleep properly, only napped like soldiers on a train platform, boots on, breath shallow. June slipped out before dawn and rode to the old line shack by the South Creek, a place where porcupines chewed handles off forgotten shovels. She pried up a floorboard and pulled a wrapped bundle from dust. A ledger scuffed by years, edges stained with rain, the ink of names spidered, but legible: the sheriff, the banker, the man who ran freight for the mine, all cozy with the outfit she'd left behind. She stared until her heartbeat steadied, then rode home. Elias met her at the corral, eyes traveling from the bundle to her face. You sure? She nodded. Truth is a mean cure, but it works. He saddled his mare without another word. Caleb ran up, cheeks flushed. We're coming. Elias shook his head. Your job is here. June crouched, gripping Caleb's shoulders. You keep the others safe, not by fighting, by deciding things. Look at me. He did. You'll be a good man, because you'll choose to be, even when anger's easier. His throat worked. Yes, ma'am. She smiled. Don't call me ma'am. Makes me sound wise. Town felt smaller than it had last week. The buildings hunched like men expecting rain. Word had beaten them there. Faces turned from porches like sunflowers hunting daylight. The sheriff waited on the boardwalk, hat in hand. 3 deputies lined behind him, and a pair of farmers who looked like they'd come to see a hanging. June handed over the ledger. He didn't open it. Any chance this is a misunderstanding? June laughed once. No joy in it. Only if the word means what hurt does. He nodded. Fair enough. He opened the book. Names gleamed like teeth. Jeb arrived without ceremony, leading 5 men, not 2. He saw the sheriff with the ledger and smirked. Afternoon, Law. That's mine. The sheriff's eyes thinned. Funny, it says evidence on the cover. Jeb stepped onto the street, boots deep in dust. Lady stole property. June stood sideways, a duelist posture, not aggressive, not timid. I stole light and pointed it at rats. The droop-eyed man flanked left, hand low. Elias shifted, blocking him with his shadow. Street's plenty wide, he said softly. Use it. People stepped back. Quiet grew. Somewhere, a church bell discovered its purpose. Jeb tried reason first, the cheap kind. You hand me the book and I swear no Boone boy loses a breath. Elias smiled without humor. You think men like you can swear anything God listens to? Jeb's grin showed hunger. I think men like me decide what widows eat. June's voice cut through like a whip crack. He ain't widowed. His house is full. For a heartbeat, even Jeb looked ashamed. Then, shame hardened into fury. He nodded to the droop-eyed man. The man drew. The street snapped into sound, 3 shots, a gasp, a horse rearing, someone praying. When the dust settled, the droop-eyed man lay clutching a torn sleeve, gun kicked clean from his hand. June's bullet had found wood again, not flesh. Elias's second shot buried itself in the hitching rail, intentional warning. The sheriff hadn't moved his pistol. He simply held the ledger high and said, You done? Voices from windows muttered yes and no. Jeb looked around and realized how alone power feels when light finds it. This ain't finished, he spat. The sheriff finally drew, slow as scripture. It is on this street. Court met in the church, because the town didn't have a courthouse, and God had better acoustics. June sat in the front pew, hat in hands, while the sheriff read names and numbers aloud. Each page turned sounded like a shovel biting a grave. A banker fainted. The freight boss tried to slip out and found 2 farmers blocking his way, hands sure from lifting hay. Jeb stood with arms folded, sheet white beneath the grime. Woman's a liar. The judge, borrowed from the next county, looked over his spectacles. Son, the figures calculate. It took 3 hours to stack the rotten timber and show where it had cracked. When the judge finally spoke, his voice had the softness of worn leather. Warrant stand. This court orders seizure of assets related to the conspiracy and remands the named for transport. The sheriff nodded, tired and older. Jeb? Jeb smiled without joy. You can chain me, but men bigger than you will cut me loose. He glanced at June. Debts still unpaid. She stood, eyes steady. I'll pay mine now. She crossed the aisle and laid the ledger at the altar rail. I rode wrong, she said, voice carrying to the rafters without strain. I took coin from men who shot children and spat at widows. When I saw what it was, I left. But leaving ain't the same as undoing. So I bring what I stole, their true faces, and whatever happens after, I accept. Elias watched the boy's future pivot on a hinge no one could see, but everyone could feel. A woman telling truth, big enough to bruise her. The judge bowed his head. The court accepts your statement. Jeb laughed, feral. And your sentence? June turned. Mercy toward others. Transport left at dusk. Jeb in chains, the droop-eyed man nursing shame more than wound. 2 respectable citizens blinking toward a horizon that refused to pity them. The town exhaled like a herd after lightning clears. June and Elias rode home slow, the ledger surrendered, the sky rinsed clean by the day's hard rain. At the ridge, they stopped. The cabin's lamplight winked like a star that refused to die. You could keep riding, Elias said quietly. No one would blame you. June smiled, small and real. I already tried leaving. The horse keeps turning me around. Summer folded into itself the way quilts do after a long winter, soft and sure. The boys grew louder in joy and softer in spirit. Caleb whittled toys and sold them in town without swagger, returning with flour and pride. Jake apologized once without being asked and looked shocked at how light he felt. Tommy learned to whistle proper. Elias laughed more. June planted seed where the ground had been rock and found surprise green. When snow returned to the peaks, she stood on the porch and watched the valley breathe. Home, she said. The mountain, older than reckoning, agreed.